Chapter 5. Clara. Clara watched the city fade behind her as she headed out of South Lake. It was Saturday and her day off. Though she had started on a Friday, Justin had still given her the weekend to get settled into her apartment and to take some time to visit her best friend from college, Adrian. She and Adrian had met in the dorms at Texas Tech. Clara had somehow managed to snag a coveted single, while Adrian had been sidled with the roommate from Hades. The two girls had met in the hallway one night and traded horror stories. Clara hated living alone, and Adrian could barely hear herself think over her roommate's music. At the end of the semester, the two had decided to get an apartment together near campus. Though nearly polar opposites, somehow it worked for them. Clara ate a healthy breakfast of a protein waffle or eggs every morning, while Adrian had Dr. Pepper and a bag of Doritos. Clara liked enchiladas, while Adrian ate boxed mac and cheese for nearly every dinner. And while Clara had been born in a wealthy family, she'd still had to do her own laundry. Adrian, however, took her clothes to a dry cleaner and then ironed them again when she got them home. Clara chuckled as that memory surfaced in her mind. She'd come home to find Adrian ironing a pair of jeans. Jeans! "What are you doing?" Clara asked as she watched her friend move the iron slowly over the denim. Adrian looked up, confusion clouding her blue eyes. "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm ironing." "I see that, but why are you ironing jeans?" Clara hated ironing and avoided it whenever possible. Still, she'd been known to use an iron when a dress or a nice shirt was too wrinkled, but she'd never once seen anyone iron blue jeans. Adrian's brow furrowed. "How else am I supposed to get the crease line?" Clara threw up her hands and laughed. "Jeans aren't supposed to have a crease line. There's a reason they aren't considered work attire. They're supposed to be casual wear." "But they look so wrong if they don't have the crease." Clara hadn't won that argument. Even 4 years later, when the girls had gone their separate ways, Adrian still ironed her jeans. She had learned to use a washer and dryer, though, and stopped paying for a dry cleaner. Clara supposed she could count that as a win. Now, Adrian was married to a man she had met at her job and had 2 small children. Clara wondered if Adrian had relaxed her standards with the addition of the kids. It was certainly hard to keep everything pressed and put away with kids in the picture. But somehow, Clara could picture Adrian wandering through the house after the kids were asleep and picking up after them. At least her diet probably hadn't had to change much. Adrian had always eaten like a kid, which was an anathema compared to her perfection in every other area of her life. Adrian's house was just as Clara pictured it. The grass was manicured to perfection and still green, though it was January. They probably had the sprinkler system on a timer if Adrian's husband was as meticulous as she was. A white picket fence surrounded the land, and a wraparound porch completed the look. Clara pulled up to the side of the fence and turned off the car. As if she had heard the sound of the car, Adrian popped out of the front door a moment later. She held her youngest on her hip, and the older boy toddled behind her. It had been a few years, but other than wearing a slightly harried expression, Adrian looked exactly the same, with her long blonde hair, blue eyes, and soft smile. "Clara, I can't believe you're actually here." Adrian wrapped her in a side hug with her free arm. "Me either." The two had talked about getting together for years, but it had never seemed to work out between their schedules. "Come on inside. I was just about to get lunch going for the kids." Clara grinned. "Let me guess, mac and cheese and Dr. Pepper?" Adrian laughed. "Please, I've grown up since then. We add hot dogs now." The interior of the house was exactly what Clara had pictured. Simple and minimal, everything had its place. Clara wished she had that trait, but organized chaos seemed to be more her style. She knew where everything was, but it appeared a cluttered mess to everyone else. So, how is the new job? Adrian asked as she plunked the little girl in a high chair and opened the fridge to pull out a bottle of milk. She placed it in the bottle warmer and then moved to the stove to stir the pot. It's been good, so far. Adrian turned around and fixed her with a knowing stare. Uh-oh, I hear hesitation. What does that mean? Clara sighed as she sat down in one of the cream-colored bar stools. You remember that ex-boyfriend I told you about? Adrian's brow furrowed as she thought back through the years. The one who wanted to be a football player? That's the one. Turns out he made it, and now I'm one of the athletic trainers on his team. Clara's eyes dropped to the marble counter, and she traced a gold thread that ran through it with her fingertip. I see. Adrian opened a cabinet and grabbed a bowl, filling it with mac and cheese and setting it before her son. And is that an issue because you still care about him? She grabbed the bottle from the warmer and handed it to the little girl. I don't know. It was such a mess when we broke up, but I honestly never thought I'd see him again. The memory of her father telling her that she had to break it off with Mason tried to enter her mind, but she pushed it away. She would not revisit that right now. And have you spoken with him yet? Adrian filled another bowl of mac and cheese and offered it to Clara, who shook her head. She'd never been able to stomach the taste of the powdered cheese sauce herself. Yeah, a little. He came into my office to help me unpack. He didn't seem mad, but we were interrupted by my new boss before we really got to talk much. I'm sure I'll have to work with him soon, and I have no idea what to say. Do you even know if he's still single? Adrian raised a brow as she sat in the bar stool across from Clara. Clara hadn't even considered that. Would it be better if he were taken? Worse? She honestly had no idea. I don't, but I have been following him a little in the news, and they've never mentioned a girlfriend or wife. Wait. Adrian set down the spoonful she was about to eat. You mean you knew he played for this team when you took the job? Clara grimaced, and the yes she squeaked out was much higher than her normal voice. You have to understand that this was a huge opportunity. These jobs don't come around very often, and I couldn't not apply. Uh-huh. I hear that, but I kind of feel like you don't get a pass on this one. She picked up the spoon again and pointed it at Clara. You knew what you were getting yourself into. And she had, sort of. She'd known he would be there, but she hadn't been prepared for the barrage of feelings that would hit her when she saw him again. Nor had she been prepared for her breath to catch around him and her heart to beat faster when he was around, or when someone mentioned his name. Yeah, I guess I did. Clara didn't want to talk about Mason any longer, and the growling of her stomach reminded her that she hadn't had lunch yet either. Do you have anything I can make a sandwich with? Or a salad? Of course. Adrian laid out bread, meat, cheese, and vegetables, and Clara fixed herself a decent meal. So, how about you? She asked as she sat down again. How is your job going? Adrian had studied social work in college, and the few times they had spoken on the phone over the years, she had always told Clara how stressful it was, but how much she loved it. Adrian took a sip of her Dr. Pepper and glanced at the two children to make sure they were still good before answering. Well, I'm just getting back into the swing of things after maternity leave, but it's harder now. What do you mean? I mean having kids of my own. It always broke my heart to see children in bad situations and to have to take them away from their parents, but I knew it was for the best. It hurt even worse when I had to reunite them with those parents before they were really ready in some cases. But now that I have Cade and Chrissy, it's so much harder. Every little face I see reminds me of them, and I think about how awful it would be if someone took them away from me. Clara glanced at the two beautiful children as she chewed. That would be hard to take. She wasn't a mother yet herself, but she knew how much these two meant to Adrian. After swallowing, she posed the question that sat heavy in the air. "Are you going to keep doing it?" Adrian sighed and scooped out the last of her mac and cheese. "I don't know. David makes good enough money that I don't have to work, but it's always been a part of me, you know?" Clara did. Adrian's father had left when she was little, and her mother had raised Adrian and her little brother all by herself. Unfortunately, her mother's schedule and absence a lot of the time had strained their relationship, and Adrian had moved out as soon as she was of age. She'd worked hard to provide for herself and her little brother, and though she had spoken with her mother a few times before her death, Clara wasn't sure she had ever really forgiven her. "Is there something else you could do in the same line? Maybe running a fostering program or working at an adoption agency?" In truth, Clara had no idea what other avenues Adrian's degree might work for, but it was worth a thought. "Yeah, maybe. I'm still thinking about it for now." "Mommy, can we play in the backyard now?" Cade asked from the table. His cute voice tugged at Clara's heart. If she hadn't broken things off with Mason, would they be married now? Would she have kids of her own? Maybe a little boy who looked like him that he could play football with in the backyard? Stop. That was not a path she needed to go down. She'd made her decision years ago when she'd allowed her father to convince her that breaking up with Mason was the right thing to do. There was no going back from there. A husband and kids might still be in her future, but they wouldn't be his kids. "Sure, Cade, as soon as Miss Clara is ready," Adrian said as she took her bowl to the sink and washed it. That part hadn't changed either. Adrian had never been one to leave a dish in the sink. She'd always wash them immediately after use. Clara wondered if that stemmed from being on her own so young and probably not having many dishes to spare. "I'm ready," she said, balling up the paper towel she had made her sandwich on and tossing it in the trash can she spied by the door. Then she grabbed Cade's bowl and took it to Adrian, knowing her friend would want to wash it too before heading outside. When the dishes were washed to Adrian's satisfaction, she grabbed Chrissy and the four headed out back. A small play structure, complete with swings and a slide, sat in the yard, and Cade took off running toward it before the door was even shut behind them. "He must enjoy that," Clara said with a laugh. Adrian rolled her eyes. "He does. He is all boy, that one, and we haven't been able to get outside much." The day was unusually warm for January, but Clara knew what she meant. It had been cold and rainy most of the last week. Just then, Cade's cry pierced the air. Clara looked to see him sitting on the ground and holding his arm. Though she hadn't seen it happen, she could imagine he must have slipped on the ladder of the slide and scraped his arm. "Oh dear, can you hold her?" Adrian asked, holding out Chrissy for Clara to take. "Actually, where's your first aid kit? I'll fix him up. It's what I do after all." Adrian gave quick directions, and Clara hurried into the house and to the bathroom. In the cabinet under the sink had been Adrian's words. Clara opened the door and found the kit exactly where she'd said it would be. Another point for a neat and orderly house. If only she could keep hers the same. Then she raced back outside to bandage up the boy. After a few promises that he was okay and a Band-Aid to cover the scratch, Cade happily went back to the play structure. It was amazing how easily kids could bounce back from tears and hurts. Clara watched him and wished that broken hearts in adults were as easy to mend.